Thanks. Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Melissa Flournoy. I'm the board chair of Louisiana Progress Action. And Louisiana Progress supports a fair, transparent, accountable redistricting process. And we're happy to work with many groups, including Fair Districts, the Power Coalition, the League of Women Voters, PAR, and other groups committed to protecting redistricting to ensuring the value of every vote. We understand that the census data will be released later this fall and may delay the work of the legislature in the redistricting process. But we appreciate the time and interest of the Speaker and the President of the Senate to lay out the outline for basic principles for redistricting and to talk about the timeline for the process. Last year, Louisiana Progress supported legislation to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission and a public process of civic engagement that includes public hearings, a website, and informational briefings in each region of the state. And we're excited to hear that that is still part of the plan. The redistricting process is one of the most important functions of the legislature and will affect the outcomes of the elections for a decade and the governance of the state. We believe that districts should be drawn to fairly represent the citizens of Louisiana and not be gerrymandered to protect incumbents or political parties. Louisiana Progress is concerned over the overpacking of districts based on party or race to ensure the outcome of a particular political party. We would like to see certain principles adhered to in order to create more competitive districts based on these principles that we've heard about today of proportionality, competitiveness, and minority rights. In the past, many districts were drawn in an effort to protect incumbents and to minimize the voting power of ethnic minorities or protect Republican congressional seats. We hope that with the implementation of term limits, there will be more openness to look at the redistricting process based on data, facts, community of interest, rather than solely on incumbent protection. We believe that districts should be compact, contiguous, and avoid drawing strangely shaped districts to meet political goals. We're grateful for one of the statements in the HCR that supports districts should try to avoid splitting existing voting precincts in municipalities and parishes. As this committee will have the responsibility for redistricting, we wanted to take this opportunity to reinforce and discuss these principles that Robert Travis Scott has gone over and Mr. Bergeron, so I won't go further into that. But we're also really fortunate to have the leadership of Patricia Lowry and her staff who have managed the redistricting process now into our fourth redistricting cycle. I would ask that the committee would consider an amendment to add the public review process, the regional meetings, and language about the website for recommended plans to the language of HCR 90. I understand that the decisions have been made to do public hearings, to have a website, but I think it would be really helpful to include that information in this HCR. And Mr. Vice Chairman, I think there may be a draft agenda that's been submitted to you or others, including that transparency language.
A draft amendment?
I believe so.
Possibly. We definitely got a lot of information as a committee on yesterday, much of which has still been reviewed. Even if we were to try to offer that up right now, I don't know that we have a quorum to do so.
Okay.
But I have had conversations with the chair about that specific language even prior to getting public comment. So I certainly see no issue with it. I think it could only be more helpful to have such language in there as soon as Ms. Lowry comes back in. And
Okay.
I think we have more members to actually flesh out the possibility of such an amendment. I'm happy to entertain that.
Yeah, we just believe that it would be really helpful to outline the timeline for the redistricting process, as well as to clearly articulate that regional meetings will be held, that the website is publicly available, and to specifically add that language into this HCR.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the chairman because I know he can probably address this himself, but when we talked about the timeline in particular, because we haven't received the information from the federal government yet, we didn't want to tie our hands necessarily because we don't exactly know how it's going to play out. But I'll let Chairman Stefanski speak specifically to the idea of putting specific timelines in place when there's still some uncertainty there. But the idea of putting language in there around guidelines for a public process, I certainly support that idea.
Well, I think if the intent of the HCR is to provide a joint rule on the operations for both the House and Senate for drawing the redistricting process, I think in terms of clarity for the public, in terms of accountability and transparency, it would be appropriate to add the language regarding those activities, which will substantially strengthen the accountability of the redistricting process. Because we believe citizens need access to information. We want people to feel like they're included in this redistricting process, that they have the time to review new maps and provide input. And so I just want to thank you for taking this process of redistricting seriously as one of your sacred responsibilities to protect voting, democracy, and free and fair elections.